What's up, garden nerds? Today we're gonna nerd out over watering. How should I water my trees and my plants and my vegetables? It's a question we get all the time. Let's talk about it. Come on, let's go. So let's talk about watering. It's a question I get all the time, specifically from new gardeners, people who are just getting into planting trees or people who are just getting into gardening. It's a very hard question because every house is different, every state is different, every microclimate is different. It depends on the tree, it depends on your soil conditions, it depends on how much water you're actually putting out. So there are so many different factors, it's impossible to say, you should water that twice a day. It's so hard to tell. So I'm gonna hopefully teach you things that will help you figure out how much water you need to be giving it, because every situation and every scenario is completely different. I will say, if you live in hot desert climates like here in Mesa, Arizona, you are probably not watering enough. A lot of people worry, I don't want to water too much because I don't want to get root rot. I don't want to ruin my trees that way. If you're in a hot desert climate, you probably don't need to worry about that. You're probably not watering enough. So the best rule of thumb in all of watering, you want to water deeply and you want to water infrequently. What do I mean by that? You want to do a slow water, a watering that goes deep down into the ground. What that does is that encourages the roots to go deep down into the ground. Think about when you're digging a hole, and the deeper you go, the cooler it is. The sun can't penetrate down there. It's not hot down there. That's where you want your roots to hang out. If your roots are hanging out at the surface, where the sun gets, where the heat gets, it's gonna fry those roots, and the tree or plant or vegetable is not going to be happy. So every time you water, think deep. You can't water deeply by simply grabbing your hose, spraying it down and saying, oh, there we go, I just watered. That is not how you get a good deep watering. Let me show you what is not a proper watering. Coming out here with your hose. Here's my moringa tree. I'm gonna sit here, count to 30. Okay, it's been 30 seconds. That's a good watering. Let me move on to my peach tree. Now let me stand here for 30 seconds. Tons of water coming out of my hose, so it must be getting watered properly. Okay, it's been 30 seconds. Now let me move on to my next tree. No, that is not how you properly water. You want a long, slow watering that's gonna be able to penetrate deep into the ground. If this is all you're doing, you're just spreading water around the surface of the ground, the water is not penetrating deeply into the ground. Let it come out slowly. Let enough come out, but let it come out slowly so that it can penetrate deep into the ground, and again, encourage the roots to go deep into the ground. You cannot get a good deep watering by using drippers either. Drippers usually, at most, they'll put out like 10 or 15 gallons an hour. Most of them do like 1 or 2 or 3 gallons an hour. So even if you have that dripper running for 5 hours, you're hardly getting any water. You need to either use bubblers for all your trees, or you need to use the actual hose. You turn the hose on, you give it just a small trickle, and then you put it there for a couple hours and you let it drip out and you let it get nice and deep. Drippers don't work. Hose or bubblers is what you need. Okay, this is what I mean by drippers. This is what a lot of people try to use to water their fruit trees. These are great for things like garden boxes. They're great for flowers, great for some shrubs, things to that nature. But when you're trying to grow fruit trees and establish really deep roots, this will not get the job done. Even on this one, I've twisted it, crank it up to like its highest setting. That still is not a ton of water. Fruit trees like water, and we want it to penetrate deeply. This will not get the job done. So leave these away from your fruit trees. It's not what they want. Here's what I mean by bubblers. You can see there's so much more water coming out of this one. This is enough water to where it can go down deep. It can encourage the roots to go down deep. These are so much better than the drippers because so much more water is coming out of it. This is what you want for all your fruit trees. And if you are using your garden hose to water, if you don't have a watering system set up, which for a lot of my trees, I did not up until only 6 months ago. I did most of my watering by the garden hose. You just want to turn it on so it's somewhat of a trickle like this. You want to put it down somewhat by the tree. Here's my guava tree. Let's see, gonna get some guavas this year. Check those out. But you just set it down, and depending on your soil, again, how well draining it is, every situation is different. Set it down, walk away for a couple hours. Some of your bigger trees with better draining soil, walk away for 12 hours, walk away for 24 hours. Let it soak nice and deep. You're gonna have healthier trees the deeper you water and the deeper the roots are. When it comes to watering your plants in pots, that is completely different than watering your trees and your plants that are in the ground. When it comes to pots, especially in the summer, it is almost impossible to overwater them. You can water them daily, you can water them twice daily, especially if it's a hot pot, a pot that's black, a pot that's in the sun. Those roots are just getting fried all day long. And so you want to water. A lot of times too, people will water it for 20 seconds and they'll think, oh good, it's completely watered. But then if you stick your finger down in there or you stick your hand down in there, you notice that only a portion of the soil is wet. You need to really soak them. Stay there for a few minutes and really soak the pot, get all that soil wet. If you're not watering daily, the roots are probably suffering, they're probably frying. Make sure with all your pots that they're getting watered properly. Also, if the pot is in the sun, you're gonna need to water more. If you're in a hot desert climate, like here in Arizona, throw them in the shade when it gets really hot. Right now, we're in the middle of August and it's hot. It's been over 110 degrees many days. Throw it in the shade, give it a break. That'll help a lot, get it through these hot summer months. Here's an example for you. This is a sweet almond bush. It is in a black pot that attracts the sun and the heat, and it sits out here in the heat all day long. This thing needs to be watered a lot more than a normal pot that maybe is bigger, that isn't black, and that isn't out in the sun. So if you have a pot like this, either A, move it to the shade, or B, be sure to water it a lot more often than you would your other plants. So here are two pots that are up against my house that is east facing. They're not black, and they're covered by, these are vincas that are covering it, so it's kind of covering the pot, so it helps keep the moisture in a lot more. Those are canna lilies right there. And so I don't need to water these nearly as much because they don't get nearly as much sun. They're bigger pots and they are covered by flowers and leaves that keep the pot not so hot. Let's talk about watering your garden boxes for a minute. So I have this one right here, and then to the left, I have this one. I water these two both very differently, and here's why. You can see this one over here has the watermelon vine that is completely climbed over it. It's very thick canopy. It gets shaded a ton. It's also on the east side, so it doesn't get the very hot afternoon sun. Whereas if you come over here to this one, there's nothing covering the top. It's not as dense, and you can see there's a lot more exposed dirt. So this one gets a lot hotter, it gets a lot more sun. It also gets that west sun all afternoon, and it just completely just blasts it with the sun and the heat. So this one over here gets watered a lot more with a lot more water than does this one. So you have to take your situation. Each situation is unique. It's different in every spot in your yard, it's different, and you have to adjust accordingly to make sure that you're watering enough or not giving too much water. Now, if you're still worried about watering your plants too much, what you want to check for is standing water. What does that mean? That means if you water and there's water, visible water on the ground that's pooling, and then you walk back out an hour after or 2 hours after and there's still that same water pooling there, that means you've probably watered too much, or at least that means you need to wait until that water is gone before you water again. If you're getting that pooling water or that standing water, that probably means your soil is not fast draining. It's not good quality soil. So what can you do? When you plant your trees, when you plant your other plants, you can add or amend your soil and add organic material. Worm castings, compost, chicken manure, things to that nature, you can add to the soil, and that helps it become more well draining. So that way when you water, the water goes through and it goes deeper instead of just standing on the surface where the roots are not, and it's not going to encourage the roots to go down deep. So you want to make sure that you have good, well draining, fast soil. And if you don't have that, you need to add stuff. Oh, gypsum is also something that you can add to it. That helps break down the soil to where it's more fast draining. We have, especially here in the Phoenix area, we have this clay soil that's really compact. And so sometimes it can be hard for the water to penetrate. So you need to make sure that you're adding organic material to the soil to help it be better draining. Okay, now there are a few notes that we need to make. When it comes to newly planted seedlings, like in your garden, vegetables or peppers or things to that nature, those have no root establishment. They're brand new. So you need to make sure that those are constantly moist because they don't have roots that can go out and find water. So you need to be constantly, maybe a couple times a day, especially if you plant them in a hot time of year, they need to be constantly moist. You need to constantly be watering them. Same thing with fruit trees. As soon as you put a fruit tree in the ground, again, it has no roots that can go out and find water, find other sources of moisture. So when you water it, you're watering the base of it where the roots are, but that water quickly dissipates and goes elsewhere, and those roots are just sitting there starving for water. So when you first plant new plants, you need to make sure that you're watering them, maybe a couple times a day, at least daily, to keep that root ball moist with water so that they don't dry out. After a while, you can slowly decrease how many times a day you're watering, or how many, if you're watering daily, you can go to maybe twice daily. You can slowly decrease the amount of water and the frequency of watering, because at that point, the roots are growing out and you want to water deeply again so that the roots can grow down where all the moisture is, where the coolness is. So for newly planted plants, they need to be watered more frequently. Once they're mature, once they're established, you can go to less frequent waterings. Let's talk about a question I often get when it comes to watering. They say, what time of the day should I water? In some climates where it's a little bit cooler, you don't want to water late at night because the water will sit there. That's a chance for fungus to come in, for other diseases to come in because it's too moist. In Arizona, in the summertime, you probably don't have to worry about that, but a good rule of thumb for all climates, water early in the morning. That's when I like to do it. You just wake up, it's refreshing, you're out in your garden, you're watering. That's the best time of day to water your plants, is in the morning. Let's talk about probably the most important thing when it comes to watering, especially in hot desert climates. What is that? Mulch. You have to mulch in order to increase your watering efforts. The more you mulch, the less you have to water and the happier your trees are. And I want to show you what I mean by mulching. Check this out, guys. Do you see all of this? This is yard clippings, grass clippings. It is everything. I don't use my green barrel. I just throw everything down. Now, what does that do? If you get in here, you can see at the top, it's dry grass. When I get down here, look at this. It's wet, it's dark soil. There's tiny worms in there, there's life in there, things are moving around in there. So just with those few inches, those 6 inches to a foot, you can see it makes a huge difference and it holds all that moisture in there. It retains all that water. So I don't have to water nearly as much because all that moisture stays in there. The trees are happier. They're constantly receiving that moisture. The soil's happy, the soil's alive. What else does that do? Not only is it keeping the water in, but all this organic material is slowly breaking down and it's feeding, it's fertilizing my trees. It's a natural fertilizer, it's a free fertilizer, so that I don't have to fertilize nearly as much. So if you are in a hot desert climate, you have to mulch. People say, well, what can I use for mulch? Anything, everything. Yes, you can use oleander. Yes, you can use leaves from whatever specific tree you have. Yes, you can even use your Bermuda grass clippings. I promise they will not sprout up and start growing Bermuda where you place them. Whoever tells you that, they've probably never done it to figure it out themselves, but you're not gonna start growing grass everywhere. I do it all the time and it works beautifully. So if you are not mulching, you need to mulch. Get rid of that rock, it's hot, it doesn't retain the moisture, and start using mulch on your fruit trees. Okay, so I want to show you this so that you can see how much heat mulch actually blocks out. So I have my little gun here, my temperature gun, and I'm gonna shoot it here on top of the mulch, and it's registering 105 degrees. Now let's come down in here. Let's pull away all this mulch, dig down a little bit. You see all the awesome black soil. And now let's come at it again. And now it's registering 90 degrees. So that's a 15-degree difference just by moving away all of this mulch. So you can see how valuable mulch is. If the only mulch you have is rock, which really isn't mulch, that's just gonna add to the heat. That's gonna make things hotter. So you wanna make sure you're stacking as much mulch as you can around your trees. Here's my mango tree. Look at all this mulch. It's all my bamboo trimmings, cuttings, just completely piled as high as can be. The trees love it. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope that now, after seeing everything that I'm doing, you can figure out how much you need to be watering. It's different for everyone. You can ask the question, how often should I be watering? Because it's different for everyone. So take the things that I've taught you, go out to your yard, find your unique situation, and figure out how much you need to be watering. But I'll tell you, like I told you before, you're probably not watering enough. Give your trees water. And one other thing, watering is not the whole equation. That's often what we focus on. They need water, but they also need to be fed. Your trees are hungry. Feed them, fertilize them. Look at my video up here that I did a few months ago that talks about what you should be feeding your trees, and go out and feed them as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Tell me if you want me to make any other videos specific to your needs, and I'll be more than happy to do it. Have a great day.